Good morning and welcome to the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting for the 14th of October 2024. I'm Councillor James Caston and I'm your chair today. I'll just remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please keep your mobile phones on silent or switched off, as well as your laptops. We'll be using e-voting in this meeting. Council members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. If you are intending to do so, please inform the committee clerk, and in case of a fire, please leave the building immediately via the fire exits and make your way to the assembly point, which is the Ipswich Town football ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium, ground floor area and walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts, and do not enter the building until you're told it's safe to do so. Right, thank you very much. So in this meeting today, we've got some representatives. We've got the Councillor Jessie Carter, the Babergh Cabinet Member for Housing. We've got Councillor Richard Winch, who's the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet Member for Housing and Property. And we've got officers. If I could ask you to introduce yourself. So I'll start with Deborah Fenton, please.
Good morning, I'm Deborah Fenton. I'm the Director of Housing for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk.
Thank you very much. David White.
I'm David White. I'm Head of Housing Transformation and Regulation, looking after the tenant engagement function of the Council Housing Service.
Thank you. Georgia McCoy.
Hi, I'm Georgia McCoy and I'm the Tenant Engagement Coordinator for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk.
Thank you very much. And we also have external representatives, Liz Perryman.
Good morning. I'm Liz Perryman and I'm the Chairman of the Babergh Tenants Board. Babergh and Mid-Suffolk Tenants Board, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. And I've got Alicia Norman, who's running everything from the as our lead officer here. So thank you very much for being here today. And I'll move to the agenda. So for item 1 is apologies for absence and substitutions.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Grandon with Councillor Malvesi substituting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Are there any? No. Item 3, to confirm the minutes of the joint meeting held on the 15th of July 2024. Have you all had a chance to go through those minutes, and do you have any points regarding the accuracy? So could I have a proposer for those minutes? Councillor McLaren and a seconder, Councillor Wyman. And what we'll do is we'll do a show of hands for everyone that agrees with those minutes. That's everyone apart from Councillor Hendry and Councillor Scarf, who I believe you weren't at that meeting, so that's, I think, an abstention. But that's carried. Thank you. So that confirms the minutes. Right, item 4 is to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Questions by the public?
None received.
Questions by councillors?
None received, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we have item 7, JOS 24.5, Tenant Scrutiny Update. I'd like to invite the Chair of the Tenant Scrutiny Board to introduce the report to committee. Thank you.
I'm pleased to be here today as Chair of the Tenant Board to provide the Overview and Scrutiny Committee with our first update on the tenant scrutiny activities carried out so far this year. This is also an opportunity to enable Tenant Board to showcase what has been achieved by the scrutiny work they have directed, and to evidence that the recommendations have been listened to and acted upon. showing the committee that tenants have effectively influenced our landlord services. The report outlines the scrutiny projects on both the tenant handbook, which will help tenants, members and staff to understand the services we provide as a landlord to ensure consistent communication about the level of services tenants can expect from us. We have also co-designed the 23-24 annual report to tenants, which shows the housing service performance on key areas, giving tenants the opportunity to scrutinise us and hold us to account. The appendices shows the design documents with the outputs from the scrutiny projects. The Tenant Board would welcome any feedback from the overview and scrutiny committee before we start our third project, looking at complaints, and ask that it provides assurances to tenants that tenant influence has been considered and acted upon throughout our first two scrutiny projects this year.
Thank you. Is there anything else to add from officers now, or should we go into questions?
I do have a presentation just to run through what we've done with questions.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I just wanted to kind of run through what it is, why we're here and what it is that we're doing, seeing as this is our first Tenant Board scrutiny update to yourselves. So just to give everybody a bit of background, so the reason we're doing this is all because obviously it's very important to make sure that our tenants can influence services based around the service that they're getting as for us being their landlord, apologies, and the introduction of the new social housing regulations this year, meaning that there is a new emphasis on transparency, influence and accountability within the consumer standards. So as you can see there, we must give tenants a wide range of meaningful opportunities to influence and scrutinise our strategies, our policies and our services. We must assist tenants who wish to implement tenant-led activities to influence and scrutinise their landlord strategies, policies and services. We must also provide accessible support and meet the diverse needs of our tenants so that we can engage, so that they can engage in those opportunities. And we must work with tenants to regularly consider the ways we improve and tailor the approach to delivering landlord services, including how we engage with them. So what are we doing? So as you'll see from the reports that we've provided to you, we have created a new scrutiny structure for our tenant board, which you can see in the diagram on the left-hand side. This provides the tenant board with access to members and gives members assurance that we are listening and acting on tenant feedback. We also have designed our scrutiny roadmap for tenants so that they can see how they can get more involved in scrutinising of landlord services. And obviously underpinning all of this, we have our tenant engagement strategy, which was approved by members in 2022 and is annually reviewed.
Sorry, David. Could we? Are we able to tweak the focus? Because it's just, I don't know whether it's me or it seems a bit blurry. If we're able to do anything, we can.
I'm not sure I can do anything. Perhaps I can send the presentation to members afterwards, and you can have a
yeah, that's fine. I think we can still read it. It's just.
This is more just sort of a visual representation of all the things that we're doing, but the detail should be in the paper pack for you as well.
Thank you, and sorry to interrupt you when you're in your full flow.
No problem. Thank you. And obviously, as you can see on the bottom right-hand side, we've also implemented our approved by tenants tick. So this is something that we will attach to any policy, strategy or document that tenants have had an influence or say over. So this brings us on to the reason we're here today. So really the tenant scrutiny projects that that the Tenant Board have directed us to carry out this year. The first one being the tenant handbook, and as Liz Perryman kindly said, this is to ensure that we are consistently providing the same messages to tenants about the landlord services that we provide. This document is very much a living and breathing document because obviously services will change and flex based on the needs of our tenants and us as a council. So yes, so as I say, this is a kind of a completed version of the handbook, but it will be amended as and when it's required. And the Tenant Board also co-designed our annual report. This is something that we have done in the past. However, the Tenant Board were much more involved this year in the information that they wanted to present to tenants. And you'll see there the example of the Mid-Suffolk version. We obviously will have a Babergh version as well, because we're two different councils, so we have two different sets of performance metrics. So our ask of committee members today is for the committee to review the activities carried out by the Tenant Board and to note the recommendations made and the actions taken as a result. This is really just to ensure and provide assurance to all tenants that the scrutiny activity that's been carried out, we've actually listened to and done what we said, so that officers can't just make decisions without tenant influence. To make any additional recommendations on the work carried out so far, and to suggest to the Tenant Board what they might want to scrutinise next. As Liz said, we are looking at doing complaints next, and possibly antisocial behaviour if we've got time this year. If not, we will do that early next year. So if members are in support of that, that would be really useful to know. And also, as I said, to give assurance that the tenant scrutiny activity is meaningful and that tenants are influencing our services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll go to questions. I wouldn't mind starting the question with the question part with. I've been told that when people have complex needs, they have a PA or somebody that will help them go through a document like this. How do we deal with that? Does everyone that needs it have this person on hand or?
So we do obviously accept that some tenants will require representation. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to have any. They don't have to meet any particular threshold in terms of their needs. Anybody can ask for somebody to represent on their behalf, and we just need to make sure that we've got the permission of the tenant for them to do that. One of the things that we are also looking at as a service area is providing an accessible tenancy agreement, so something that is easy to read, because as you can appreciate, our tenancy agreement is several pages long, and I very much doubt it's ever been read cover to cover. So we are looking at producing, as I say, an easy read tenancy agreement, which will hopefully is more pictorial and will help people who may struggle to understand, give them that extra support.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor McLaren.
I was giving other people the opportunity, but I just want to some of the detail about the conversations with tenants. I was interested in what some of the comments were. But first, you said you'd had 402 tenants reply. What would have put that into context is how many tenants were actually approached in the first place. Do you know how many that was, David?
Yeah, so the return rate was actually 26%, which is really, really good for a survey of this this type. Actually, we do usually get very good return rates. There is a real willingness of our tenants to tell us what they think and influence how we're delivering services. So 26% is good, but obviously there's always room for improvement there.
Thank you. Can I? How many questions am I allowed?
Yes, as many as you want.
All right. Ethnicity. Now, I was interested in that because in the responses there was nobody from. I don't think there was anybody from one of the ethnic communities. So I would like to know, as a council, what proportion we have of people from other ethnic groups with it as our tenants? Thank you.
Yeah, so we are collecting all of that information at the moment. Obviously, we get a lot of that information when somebody, becomes a tenant of Babergh Mid Suffolk. However, there are a few gaps in the data that we hold about our tenants, and it's a really important point that you've brought up, Councillor McLaren, because it's something that the regulator expects us to know. How can we serve our tenants if we don't know what their specific needs are? Yes, all I can say is that I don't know that off the top of my head what our figures are. We do, with all of our surveys now, we do ask those questions so that we can fill in any gaps that we might have, but also to check against our tenant profile that the engagement work that we've done is representative of our tenant population.
Obviously, there would be some perhaps different ways of approaching things with a different group.
Yes.
But making sure that they have the same service. Question I've got is about sheltered housing officers.
Yep.
So there was a mixture of comments about that. What management and supervision is carried on from, say, your department over sheltered housing officers, and how often are they assessed for competence, etc.?
So my team, the tenant engagement team, will work with the sheltered housing officers when there's a particularly complex piece of work that's going on that directly impacts on the residents of sheltered housing. An example of that would have been the service charge work. So Georgia and her colleague Kerry did go and visit a number of schemes with the sheltered housing officers to ensure that tenants' voices were heard and that we were taking that feedback into consideration. We're also looking at our housing management structure, so we're looking at what we can do in the future to ensure that everybody, and not just those that happen to live in a sheltered accommodation, but all of our tenants across all of our neighbourhoods have representation, and somebody that they can go to about their housing services. So I would say, watch that space. And obviously, in terms of competency, there is the new competency and conduct standard coming in, which will ultimately require management to hold specific qualifications. However, we're looking at going one step further with that in terms of our any customer-facing officer who works in housing. We're looking at their professionalism and how they may not need to do a qualification necessarily, but we are looking at how we can extend their knowledge and understanding of tenants' needs and housing legislation.
Because in fact, sometimes that is a throwaway remark you get from tenants about the support they get. So I'm interested that you're going to pursue that and make it more formalised.
Yeah.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. This might be slightly outside of the handbook, but I was interested. It seemed that a tenant needs to apply for a garden change to put a composter in, from what I read in there. Is this, am I oversimplifying the rules?
I think it's more to do with if there's been a sort of an issue with pests or something in the area, and it's also, I think, mainly for communal spaces. So
okay.
if it's a block of flats with a communal garden, that would be when permission is required. You wouldn't necessarily need permission if it was just, a terraced house with your own back garden and the compost heap. No.
No, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's very important in a community.
And we always say to our tenants, if in doubt, ask, and we'll never unreasonably withhold permission for anything. So.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wyman.
Morning. Morning, David.
Morning.
Congratulations to Liz for a great presentation. It's not always the first thing to do when you come to scrutiny to have to sit and go through a tenants thing for the very first time. When I read through the details, there's quite a strong gender bias within the feedback from the tenants. Is there any sort of process we might be looking at to try and address that gender bias? That's the sort of first question. The second question is, I also noticed that there's quite a strong interest in both heating generally and knowing how to use it, but also paying rent and things like that. So, you know, these are things which, you know, we all know, if you've ever moved into a new property or whatever, are fairly fundamental points. What processes will we try and use to improve on these points and make sure we get the information across?
Yeah, so in terms of the gender bias, you're absolutely right that I think everybody that responded to that survey was of the female persuasion. And what we're trying to do, and that's one of the reasons why we ask those questions, is because obviously we can then see you know, how representative we are. The majority of our tenants are female or identify as female. But in terms of what we're trying to do, we just need to make sure that we are still capturing you know, voices from across all demographics, you know, and as I said, you know, we work really closely with all teams across the council to make sure that all of the operational journeys that our customers are going through are opportunities to get that information and you know, understand how we can deliver more services. In terms of so with the handbook, obviously it's going to be useful for all tenants, so existing tenants as well as any new tenants. But what we really want to do is, as I said before, is really help use it for staff and members as well, because I don't know how every different heating system works in all of our tenants' homes, and neither will the housing officer. But again, as part of the housing management review that we're doing, where housing officers will hopefully have a smaller patch size to focus on, they will understand those different, you know, nuances about their different properties that they're looking after. So hopefully that will improve the knowledge and level of understanding that everybody has about as I say, the different nuances depending on property to property. But yeah, the other thing is as well is all of our sign-ups are kind of remote at the moment, so they're all done digitally and over the phone. We want to stop doing that now. That was kind of a legacy from COVID, and it sort of saw us through a difficult time. However, we know from the feedback that we've been getting from tenants that's not what they want. They want to actually see their landlord when they move in. They want to be walked through the property. They want to understand where their stopcock is, how this heating system works. You know, all of those kind of things that you would expect when you moved into, you know, when you move into a home. So yeah, so again, this is all stuff that we're using to help design our new housing management service.
Just a quick follow, David. And I know we've sort of talked about it a little bit before, which is in terms of like aspirational things we can do. Is there the possibility that in sort of larger sort of areas where we have tenants, we can create sort of tenant mentors or tenant lead people who are like go-to people, as opposed to, I know we have issues with trying to get housing managers to place, and, you know, the constraints on that, but often in communities there's often a willingness for people to go to a certain person. Is there any way we can sort of build on that and make that part of what we do?
Yeah, so one of our engagement roles that we introduced as part of the strategy in 2022 was our neighbourhood expert role. So we call all of our involved tenants experts because they truly are experts in being a tenant. Yes, so we have our neighbourhood expert role. We are recruiting to that all the time, as we do to all of our engagement roles. However, at the moment, we've got a really good take-up in our sheltered housing schemes, and they are basically, you know, pretty much what you've described there, Councillor Wyman. They are the kind of the person within that scheme that knows who to contact about various different things. We're going to make sure, obviously, that they all have a copy of our tenant handbook and are aware of how to use it. And moving forwards, what we're also looking to do is try to open that out to other general needs tenants as well. So that there might be a representative within a street or a block of flats where there isn't a sheltered housing scheme. What we've done as a sort of an interim measure, because as I said we haven't had a lot of take up on that, is we have ensured that there is a poster in all of our blocks of flat communal areas with a QR code on that somebody just has to hold their phone up to, and that will take them to a kind of a suggestion box, if you like, or a form that they can complete to let us know if something's wrong in their area or if they want to know more about a particular topic, and that goes through to our tenant engagement team. We make sure that gets put to the right place.
Perfect, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any further? Councillor Hendry.
I think I've got it working. Firstly, congratulations. I think the tenant handbook is fantastic. It would have been very useful for me when I first moved into council housing 25 years ago. I was just given a key and told, there's your house. So I think the change is fantastic. My question is, this is great for new tenants, and obviously somebody moving into their house will probably read it because it will be very useful. But how are you going to engage the existing tenants to look at this and take notice of it? Because there was a lot of things in there that I wasn't aware of because we never had that information. And I don't know whether existing tenants will take the time to think, actually, this is important for me to read. So how are you going to try and get that information out to all of the tenants, especially some of our longer term tenants, so that they're all aware? Because a lot of them are not still aware of what your responsibilities are and what their responsibilities are. So have you got any ideas of how to engage people with that?
Yeah, so that is really tricky. Obviously, as I said, it is a living and breathing document, so we don't necessarily want and don't think it would be wise to print off 7,500 copies and post it out to all of our tenants, for half of them probably to go in the recycling. So what we are doing, obviously, we are keeping it predominantly digital, but also we have to consider the fact that 20% of our tenants aren't online either. We know that. So we're looking at various different ways. So we're thinking, you know, we can have a physical copy within the library that, as and when it needs to be updated, we could ask library staff to, you know, just print out one page and change that page because we've had to change something on it. The other thing that the regulator actually suggested to us in some of the conversations that we were having with them more generally about transparency, influence and accountability standard and what we're doing to try and meet that, is the utilising of ward members. So as ward members, you will know who on your patches are not, you know, digitally included or are particularly more vulnerable. So, you know, sharing that intelligence with us as the landlord, but also for you to have that as a reference point and a guide. And I think that's what it comes back down to, is continually, as I was talking about customer operational journeys, referring people back to the handbook. So, you know, we can talk to tenants who contact us about a certain topic and say, well, if we refer to the handbook on page 64, you know, and kind of just keep trying to plug that message that it exists. Yeah, so there's just a couple of ideas. Obviously, we need to ask tenants as well how they want to, you know, how they want to consume this information. Citizens' advice as well is another good opportunity that we could make sure that, you know, because again, I'm sure that may even save a lot of phone calls in the long run and a lot of emails coming into the councils to ask for different things, because that's the point of it, is it will hopefully reduce the it will empower residents to know what it is that we're doing.
Okay, sorry, another question along the same lines. And you're saying it's a living, breathing document, which obviously it is, and I can already see things in there that may change in the relatively near future. How have you thought about how you're going to make sure, again, it's the same sort of question, but how are you going to make sure the tenants are aware that it's changed? Because obviously if you've got people referring back to their copy and that information is out of date, how are you going to make sure that everyone's aware of important changes in the way that the tenant handbook is?
Yeah, so again, we do need to think a little bit more about people who aren't digitally included, but one of the things that we do, you know, as a matter of course, when we make any changes to policy or strategy or obviously tenant handbooks, as we will do moving forward, is make sure that we're telling everybody about that through our digital tenants newsletter that goes out every month. Which is very well looked at. You know, again, we have a very good return rate, if you like, on interactions with that newsletter, and we can tell that 50% of people who receive it open it on a regular basis. We can tell who clicks through to certain articles within it, so then we know, so you know, which information is more popular and not. So yeah, again, I haven't got all the answers today because it is a very complex topic, and I think we need to think about it, you know, collectively as an organisation. It's not just on housing. This is going to be the same for all council services. If you think about it like that, it's not just our tenants who may be vulnerable. You know, just because you're a tenant doesn't automatically make you a vulnerable person. So you know, we need to remember that as well. But yes, as I say, I think that's just something that we need to think about. Welcome, open any suggestions from members as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there, Councillor Rowe?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One about the demographic questions and how you choose which ones to ask. Because I'm kind of aware in the LGBTQIA plus community, there's kind of a overrepresentation of homelessness. So that might be kind of a relevant, they may be relevant questions to ask to see whether we meeting that need. And then also, because a bit of the feedback was about energy bills and kind of the stress of when you're transferring over, not knowing how much it's going to cost. So do we know, like, do we have kind of a reasonable number of homes on where people are moving into with smart meters and so they can see, or are we kind of given that feedback? Is there anything we're doing to help people be able to get an idea? Because I know I had to call up my energy supplier because I didn't have a bill for 6 months, and kind of having a conversation over the phone, they were like, yeah, this is about how much you're using over a month, this is about how much it will cost. So once I had the detail from the meter, which being in block flats meant I had to go and get it unlocked by the freeholder, and it wasn't that simple, but once I had all that information, it reduced the stress. So yeah, is there any help we're giving for that bit?
Yeah, so we use a company called Green Energy Switch, I believe. Forgive me if the name's not quite right. But what happens is when a property becomes empty, through whatever reason, and we're made aware of it, obviously once we take possession back of that property, the energy accounts are then transferred into our name. So for the void period, or the period that the property is empty, we are, you know, responsible for the costs associated with any gas and electric being used within that relatively short period. When we know who's moving into that home, I believe we make Green Energy Switch aware of who that is, and obviously, you know, as part of this kind of new service offer that we're looking to provide tenants as well, that will be one of the conversations that tenants can have with their housing officer on move-in day or sign-up day. I'm not suggesting we're there carrying boxes in for them, but you know, on the day that they sign up and get their keys, and I mean physically sign up and see somebody, that's the sort of information that we could be sharing and hopefully alleviate some of that stress. And I take your point around the LGBTQIA representation within housing. From what we know at the moment, we don't have a large proportion of people that identify themselves in that category. But as you said, it is more around sort of homelessness. And from a tenancy perspective, once they become our tenants, they're no longer homeless. So it is something that, again, we need to just do better at, make sure we know more about our tenants so that we can ensure we're providing equitable services, which is a requirement of the regulator anyway, so we will be doing that.
Thank you. We've had quite a few tenants' handbook questions. Are there any more? It's fine to ask more beyond this point, but I was just thinking the housing annual report also is on this paper, which a few people might want to talk about. So is there anybody waiting to say anything about the tenants, ask a question about the tenants' handbook? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. David, I was just wondering if you're going to put this out or make it possible to be available to parish councils. Because I mean, personally reading it, I thought, oh, I wish I'd have had that. I mean, I know, Ruth, you were talking as a tenant, but I mean, I think as a councillor, it's a good handbook to have.
Yeah.
Are you planning on sort of sharing that with parish councils?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, that was one of the other, haven't mentioned it yet, but yes, that is one of the other audiences, as well as ward members, that we were thinking about ensuring that they know it exists, because I'm sure that parish councils get a lot of inquiries. Well, I know they do, because I've seen a lot of emails from parish councils as well. Thanks for the suggestion.
Thank you. And so obviously we'll discuss that further in debate, and if anybody still wants to say anything about the Tenants Handbook, if anything comes up or anyone's looking at anything to ask now, please do. But I wanted to talk about the I've got the Mid-Suffolk Housing Annual Report, and also there's a Babergh Housing Report out there that will be a bit different. But one thing that came out at me was on page 7 of the Mid-Suffolk, 48% of repairs completed in target timescale, non-emergency, and 50% completed in target timescale emergency. I just wondered what that means. Does that mean that we got there a day later, or do we have issues there?
So I think we've got to remember that these performance figures are for the last last financial year. Obviously, we've done a lot of work in the building services, transformation space. The figures as well, I think we have to kind of remember that we're using systems and technology which may not be updating data as quickly as we would like. But that's what we have to report, because that's what our systems are telling us. I don't think there's necessarily an issue as such. It's more around the issue with the data rather than our performance. In terms of the difference, I couldn't give you that detail at the moment. It just means when a job gets logged on the system, obviously it's date stamped. When it's completed on the system, it's date stamped again. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not been completed in real life, as it were. It just means it was completed in the system late. I'd like to think that, as far as I'm aware, the majority of our emergency jobs are completed within 24 hours. And when I say completed, I mean attended to. That might be a broken window that we obviously can't reglaze within 24 hours, but we can attend and make safe, and that would count as being done. And then anything outside of that is obviously a non-emergency repair. But again, we've got various different repair categories, of 5 days for an urgent repair or 20 days for a routine repair. So yeah, again, we just need to get better at the data that we're providing to tenants and members, and that will come as part of the investment we've made with the new job management system, which should go live in February.
So that job management system would have a absolute real time. The person finishes the job, they log the completion of that job, and that would make these a lot more useful. They're not particularly useful to us as a scrutiny committee at the moment, when it's all a case of when they were recorded, but that will change that a lot.
Yes, it will, because the new system is a job at a time. So an operative won't be able to get the next job until they close that one down. So we'll be able to see exactly how much time they're spending on every single job, how many jobs they're doing per day, rather than a load of paperwork or stuff coming back to somebody in the office. And obviously, again, that then creates efficiencies in the office to really. We've also recently employed a systems and data engineer within building services specifically, who will look at all of the data that's coming in and what we can learn from that. So 6 months into this year, 9 months into this year, we should start to see a real improvement, because obviously we will have more real-time data, and I know that we're doing better than what those figures are saying.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had was the links in this. Is this document? Are the links working at the moment, or are we waiting to set those up?
Yeah, no, the links should be working as far as I know. As I say, you've only had included in your packs the Mid-Suffolk version, and that's because the Babergh one was still being designed when we had to send the papers in to yourselves. So, so there is a Babergh one coming. We will be releasing them both at the same time. We just wanted to show you an example, today. But yes, the links should all work. And the other thing about the tenant handbook as well, and I'm not sure if it comes up within the pack that you've had, but it's interactive. So if you, from the contents page, if you only want to know about fencing, for example, you click on the fencing button, it takes you straight to the fencing page. So people won't have to flick through, 80 odd pages to find what it is that they want. So we have tried to make it as interactive and as easy to use as possible as well.
Because I'm working from a paper copy a bit archaically, but so on the actual document, they'll click on those links, they'll take them straight through, and they're very easy to navigate, much simpler. They don't have to hunt around looking for information.
No, and especially with the tenant annual report being that it's based on district performance, we want to take people to the right web page as well. So obviously we've got 2 websites because we're 2 councils. So so that's why.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Scarf.
Yeah. Obviously we're able to collect data in a better way and be more informed now than we were in the past. And as that moves forward, will this report in particular, because I think it would be useful for comparison purposes, have the next report, say, for example, have this year's figures, the 23-24, so that there's something to compare with? Because I think what we want to see as councillors, and I'm sure that's what we want to see as tenants, would be a direction of travel. So, an improvement, and then there'd be a major focus on something that hadn't improved, in fact, that had gone down. One would hope that they'd all go up, but is that the intention?
So what we do currently is we have already engaged with our tenants about what it is that they wanted to see on a regular basis in terms of performance, and we have quarterly performance dashboards or tenant performance dashboards that we publish on our website quarterly, and we tell everybody within the newsletter that they've been published, and within those they can see the last 3 months worth of data. And as you said, Councillor Scarf, the sort of trend analysis that we're looking for. I think it's a really good point and something we can consider for next year, to look at not just what the annual performance is, but look at how we've improved or maybe not so in some cases, and then where we haven't improved, what we're planning on doing as a result.
Just a quick follow-up then, Chair. So for those tenants that don't have access to online, how do they find out?
They can access it by request, but they need to know it's there. And that's the problem. So again, it's about making sure all of us are doing our part in communicating with tenants, that there's a wealth of data out there. It just it's just difficult to get it in the hands of people who are not online.
Councillor Piper.
Good morning.
So with it says on the report that 7.9% of the homes are not being decent homes. What sort of deficits do they have then?
So again, that is based on data that we hold within our system. We are in the process of carrying out a 100% stock condition survey on all of our properties, as I'm sure you're aware. And I think we're up to about 93% complete at the moment. So we have a much better idea of the accuracy of what our decency level is, but also what elements of that mean that they're not decent. So obviously focus on lots and lots of different elements, but from a perspective of what our tenants are interested in, it's their kitchens, their bathrooms, their windows, their doors, and they're, from a landlord perspective, we also need to know about the roofs and the heating system age and all of that sort of. But I can't give you a breakdown, I'm afraid, as to what those bits and pieces are. But I don't know if you wanted to say anything about our plans, Deborah.
So, well, just to give you a little bit more detail about what that means. So a property is non-decent when 3 or more elements are at a certain age or need replacing because of condition.
Okay, so it could just be like the age of the kitchen, for
Yeah.
example. Okay,
Yeah, or the age of no.
Okay.
So the age of the kitchen, the age of the bathroom, for example. And what we have every year is we have a capital replacement programme. So we have a asset database of our properties and what needs replacing, and we have a sum of money, a capital sum of money. So we update. So we have a programme of updating. And as David said, that the data which is in the report is just based on what we've got in the system, and we know some of that is wrong because we know that a lot of components, as we call them, have been updated when properties are void. So that's another reason we've been having the stock condition survey, so we can be 100% accurate in terms of what needs updating and what doesn't need updating. There is actually a consultation out on decent homes at the moment, because there is going to be what's called a Decent Homes 2, and that'll be a new standard put forward by the government, and we're not sure what that will mean yet, but it may mean, for example, that there isn't a time limit on things like bathrooms, because just because a bathroom's 30 years old doesn't mean it's not fit for purpose, for example. There could be more stringent rules on roofs, for example. So we really don't know yet. I mean, one of the things that we do know that they've looked at, which is very sensible, is to have locks on windows above the first floor, because we know that's, a window without a lock is very dangerous for children and that kind of thing. So that's just a little overview of sort of what's to come and where we are at the moment.
Councillor Riley, sorry, Councillor Riley, I had a blank spot.
That's better. Thank you very much. So, the question is, should we be concerned about the level of housing that does not meet decent standards? Should you be concerned about it? And if we should be concerned about it, what should be done so we are not concerned? I'm concerned that we have this level, and we're told, well, it's in the figures, it's this, it's that, it's the other. But in fact, is that we have housing does not meet the decent level standard, which is one of our responsibilities. And it's certainly a key responsibility of us councillors to ensure that you're doing the best we can. More importantly, that you're focusing on the important things. And, and again, the real question is, should we be concerned?
I think as officers and also members, there is always a concern if we find a percentage of our properties are not meeting the decent home standard. What we also know is a percentage of those homes will be non-decent because people have chosen not to let us into, upgrade components, and that's common, and it's people's right not to do that. However, they will be also a percentage that are not decent, as we know, and need to be upgraded as soon as we can do that, and that's why we have a capital programme. I think it's fair to say that, over the years, finances for local authorities have been very, very difficult, and that's because of the government's rent settlement and the way they worked out the finances. However, members will be aware that we did apply for funds from the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, and we were awarded. So we are using that to upgrade some of our properties, and that's in addition to the capital programme, which we've got in place starting next year. I mean, we are already updating kitchens and bathrooms, so we do already have a programme. So another couple of things to add to that in terms of the standard of properties in general. So as officers, we are fairly confident that all our properties will be at an EPC level C by 2027-28. The government target is 2030, so we know we're doing well on that. And the other thing we'll be doing is applying to the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 3. The deadline is November, and we're going to be even more bold and ambitious than we were last time. So I think what we can do is we can put that together as a package and be confident that our priority is to make sure our properties are decent and our tenants feel and know that they are living in a safe, dry, warm home.
Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the scores on around responsible neighbourhood management are not brilliant. They're in the 50% mark, and also some of the scores on keeping customers informed are quite low-ish in comparison. So what are we doing to up those scores, and have we set ourselves a target score that we would find acceptable on any of these levels, actually?
Yeah, so these are tenant perception scores. So obviously we have to, as part of the new requirements, ask a set of questions every year known as the tenant satisfaction measures, and we have to ask a certain number of tenants those questions to make sure that we've got proportionality and that the sample size is correct. You're right, those areas are some of the lower end. We do have targets, and we've actually sort of talked about, we're talking about targets with cabinet members for housing and property, because those targets have been set basically based on a moment in time of benchmarking that was carried out. We've kind of set most targets to the median of that benchmark, where we're in the lower quartile currently. That might not be where we want to be, eventually where we want to end up, but I think it's good to have kind of incremental and stretching targets so that we're not constantly looking at a sea of red performance markers. That doesn't do anybody any favours. It doesn't make, it doesn't fill officers with much, confidence or morale is not very good. So at the moment, all of our targets for tenant satisfaction measures are based on the median figure, which is, as I say, benchmarks against similar providers, so similar size providers. But we're open to doing more work with members around what they want those targets to look like longer term. In terms of what we're doing to try and improve them, we've spoken to a lot of people around the Listens and Act one. So what we don't have to do with the tenant satisfaction measures is answer any open questions, but we do. We ask quite a few open questions so that we can get that qualitative information back from tenants. With regards to the Listens and Acts thing, it's a lot around repairs. So it's that they've asked for a repair and then they don't hear back about when that repair is going to be carried out. We know that is an issue, and again, something that we're looking to address as part of the building services transformation and as part of the new housing management, as part of the new repairs management system that we're implementing. It will give tenants, the opportunity to pick an appointment, when they first log that job, or to be given an appointment through customer services if that's how they choose to raise their job. So we're hoping to see that will improve in terms of that Listens and Acts areas, and of course all the work that our tenant board are doing and the sort of stuff that we're introducing here today. Again, that will hopefully demonstrate to tenants that we do listen to tenants and we do act on their feedback. But as I say, it's all about that question has been asked, and it makes it look like it's only talking about tenant engagement. It's actually not. When you drill into what our tenants are saying, they're saying, well, I've told you this and you haven't done that. So that's what they mean by Listens and Acts. And in terms of neighbourhood contributions, again, we've done a lot of work with our community action days. So we've looked at that data and we've gone, okay, so where are our most dissatisfied tenants? Do they live in a particular area, estate or ward? And we've, over the last 2 years, we've gone out to 16 of those communities, and we've worked really closely with those tenants on, tidying up those areas. A lot of it comes down to grounds maintenance. To be perfectly honest, it's bushes that have been overgrown and things like that have not, weeds that are coming up through the cracks. All stuff that I'm sure your constituents tell you about. But we've done a lot of work with tenants there, and we've also asked them around what it is that they'd like to improve about their areas. So we've come up with our Greater Spaces initiative, which is a pot of capital funding that's available to available for tenants to suggest improvements in their areas, and we're hoping that as we've got quite a few suggestions now, we just need to get on with the delivery part of that. And again, we're hoping that we will start to see, you know, a change in the areas where people are telling us they're dissatisfied.
Thank you very much. The last few questions now. I'll just go in because I did actually hear you talk about not being able to get into a property, and it made me think, where do we sit from a health and safety obligations point of view if we can't get in the property? And do we do any sort of inspections when there's no work to be done, like the private sector might do in some cases?
So in terms of decent homes, it's not that we physically can't get into the property. What I'm referring to is that a tenant might decide that they don't want their kitchen done. It might be too disruptive for them. They might be, you know, not well, have other considerations. We do, of course, have properties that we physically can't get into to do our gas and electrical safety checks. And we have a process that we go through which involves visiting the property several times, liaising with other departments, and if that doesn't work, our last resort is to take legal action and get an injunction so we can get entry to the property. We have done that, and we will continue to do that, because in terms of safety, we have to get into the properties. We don't have a regular inspection regime at the moment, but as David alluded to earlier, we are looking at the resources in our housing management team, together with the new resources we've got in our building services, so our DLO. So we will be going out and doing regular inspections at some point in the future, and we will have more feet on the ground, so residents will be seeing an active presence from Babergh and Mid Suffolk staff, and they will be easily identified, whether it's a high vis or a coat with our name on the back. I don't know whether we've decided yet, but residents will know who we are.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rowe, and then I've got Councillor Wyman, and then Councillor Piper. So Councillor Rowe, please.
In my ward, there's an issue of houses which have been built and then road which hasn't actually been finished properly. And I've seen elsewhere in Stowmarket where there's been our tenants in a similar situation. So I know it's not in our control because it's to do with the developers, but do we kind of keep a track of what where our houses are that developers haven't quite finished, if you see what I mean? Because there's, like for example, there'll be a certain number of our tenants who have mobility issues, and then the drop curbs aren't flush with the road, so they're not actually dropped curbs. Do we keep track? It might not be something to go into the annual report of how the proportion of our houses which are in that sort of situation, but do we keep track of that?
With developments that haven't been finished, they will be still being worked on by Holly Brett's team, so she'll be working with the developers. I think if it's somebody who needs level access, entry into their property, that's something slightly different, and we'd need to talk to them about aids and adaptations. So I would urge anybody who's in that situation to make contact with the council.
I was just thinking, so for example, there's a estate where I know someone who had mobility issues, and it was kind of close to Tesco, but they wouldn't have been able to get to Tesco because of the lack of drop curbs along the route to there. So it was more about developers not finishing it rather than kind of them applying for a drop curb.
I mean, we don't have that information, but I will feed that back to Holly, because I think those are conversations we need to be having with developers, and you know, it's how are developers ensuring that, you know, their new estates are accessible to all.
Thank you. Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps I think it's a quick question for Deborah, really. It's on page 6 of the annual report. The first point I'd make was it's really welcome to see some change in our contractors, and the fact we're reviewing that quite vigorously by the looks of things. Some in place and some waiting to get into place. If you just flip down to page 7 and our performance, 60% of repairs are completed at the first visit. The average calendar days taken to complete repairs, 69.49. Repairs completed within timescale, non-emergency and emergency, 50%. Does that mean that our target time to complete repair is around about 30 days?
Our target time will differ depending on whether it's an urgent repair or an emergency repair. What I think it's fair to say is getting the information on our turnaround time for repairs is really difficult at the moment, because our system is really poor. But members will be aware that, and David mentioned earlier, that we are in the process of implementing a new job management system which will improve our turnaround times, productivity, you know, the services we give tenants. So the answer to the question is it depends on what kind of a repair it is, and we know it's an area that needs vast improvement.
What I would like to say, it looks like there is an upward trajectory in terms of the changes that you're making to move this forward, but it'd be useful, I think, for all of us to understand, and it talks to Councillor Riley's point, which is we sort of need to understand, you know, what our trajectory is, and also the impact that the changes of contractor are making to what our performance looks like.
So we will be reporting that in our key performance indicators. So David and I are putting in place quite a vigorous governance framework, which will meet the needs of the new consumer standards, and also give assurance to our residents. So Liz will be seeing those along with the tenant board on a regular basis. Our job management system will make it really clear as well. So you will see that trajectory, and also the repairs policy, which will have the detail in terms of what our key performance targets are. I think is coming to Cabinet, well, I know is coming to Cabinet towards the end of the year.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Winch, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment on Councillor Riley's statement, should members be concerned. I think we should be a bit concerned, because as a general statement, we all need the service to be better than it is. I think the question on the table is, are the right things happening to move it in the right direction? And I think the two items we're discussing now, the first one, the tenant handbook, is clarifying exactly what are we responsible for and making it clear to tenants. So as a partnership, this is what we need to do. The second item is really putting a baseline in place, which we then need to measure ourselves against to the tenants. Are we actually making the progress that we need to? But at the moment, I think we need to look at these figures with a bit of concern, because we need them to move in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Councillor Piper.
Yes, that's correct.
So would there be any benefit in the future of maybe installing hardware that enables you to do remote monitoring, so you don't ever have to get access? So when these houses at some point in the future, when they become vacant, and installing that hardware then, so you never need to get access to do those checks then?
So we'll always have to get access, because we need to physically examine, you know, the components. But we are trialling remote remote sensors at the moment around damp and mould, and that will be something that we start to do in the future. It's already in place across the sector for boilers, so you can put a sensor on a boiler and it tells you when it's going to go wrong, basically. So this is all things we can do in the future, but we're not there at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Malvesi.
Just wanted to know, thank you. I didn't find it, but I presume, although I've no right to presume, that there is a Babergh annual housing report. But it's not in the pack?
No, it's not in the pack. I thought I'd mentioned it earlier, but I might have forgot, so apologies. Yeah, there is a Babergh version and a Mid-Suffolk version. They were with our designer, so and we asked him to, because we were on a bit of a tight deadline.
But a resident in Babergh looking for the Babergh report is going to have difficulty, will they not?
Well, it's not been neither of those have been published yet, apart from in your papers. So, yeah, they won't find it if they look through the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's paperwork. But when we publish, we will publish both of them at exactly the same time and point tenants to each of their own.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap up questions. What I might do now is I might give everyone a chance. For people watching this, it's about 12 degrees in the chamber, and I think I might give people a chance to go and get a warm drink now and just have 5 minutes break before we go into debate. So I'll conclude the questions at that point. We'll go out for 5 minutes, get a drink or whatever, and come back and go straight into debate. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome back. We are on the JOS 24/5, the Tenant Scrutiny update, and we're about to go into debate. I just got a few comments so far. There's been a fantastic return on feedback for this. Like, I was really impressed by the amount of useful feedback and people willing to get involved in this. And I think I should commend Liz Perryman and also Georgina Mikoy for their work that they've done, because it is ever so hard nowadays to get people to actually believe like something like this will make a difference and it will work. And I think you've done a fantastic job. One of the feedback parts of this was that it could perhaps be less formal, the information in there, and I feel like it's exactly the right tone, because I think it is still a document instructing people on what they need to do and how they need to go about it, and you know, what's expected. So but I think that's obviously something that you've agreed to take forward and look at in the future part of this. I'll go back to the councillors in a minute, but we did discuss when we were preparing for this meeting, we discussed a officer or somebody meeting with a tenant within at the first opportunity when they take on a tenancy, which I think maybe won't be a recommendation because it's a bit outside what we're doing here, but I'd just like to sort of say that formally in a meeting, because I think in a lot of cases people have said they've struggled to find the stopcocks and they've struggled to make the heating work and everything like that. And I understand from the amount of turnover of tenants and the regions that different officers are looking after, that would be a perfectly doable thing to actually get there and take them around the house and work out where these things are and just any questions, and it'd be quite good customer service. But I will say, I'm sure I'll say it again, but thank you for your involvement in this, and it's been a really good paper to go through. So I'll go to councillors. Councillor McLaren.
Yes, can I add my thanks to James, to the chair's thanks, because I think David and your team, you have done an excellent job in what you would start from the starting point, and you think how far you've come. I think that's excellent. And I want to thank Liz and the Tenant Board, because you have participated so enthusiastically. I know you're very experienced, Liz, on the Tenant Board, but this is a new direction for you, and I hope you feel happy coming to this committee and that it will be benefit us both, really. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments? So we can look at a pre-prepared recommendation, which Alicia will read out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two recommendations written out at the moment. Number one is that the committee supports the work undertaken so far by the Tenant Scrutiny Board, in particular the Tenant Handbook. A recommendation two, that the committee endorses the suggestion that the Tenant Scrutiny Board reviews housing complaints and antisocial behaviour in the near future.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I support that. I think the complaints information in there, I haven't got it to hand, but it wasn't particularly good reading. I think we were, I can probably find it quite quickly stage 1 complaints 311, 91 were responded to on time, and stage 2 complaints 42 and 15 were responded to on time. So I absolutely support the Tenants Board for picking that out of this and saying this is where we want to look, and we'll find out what can be added to that. And any comments on those recommendations? Councillor Scarf.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, our original recommendation, 2.2, was to make additional recommendations on the work carried out so far and to suggest to the Tenant Board what they might want to scrutinise next. I must admit I'd always had a little bit of a qualm about that, because I think really it's down to the Tenant Board to decide what they want to scrutinise. There would occasionally, possibly, be an example of where councillors might make a suggestion, but I would be very surprised if the Tenant Board didn't get it right each time, because they know, because they're on the hard end of it, as it were. So I was a little bit worried about that. So, like you, completely endorse their suggestions for future reviews, because I think they would have been the next reviews that we might have suggested, but I'm really pleased that you've suggested them.
It does seem that the Tenant Board doesn't need any help from us. They know exactly where they're going and what they're doing with it. So I think all we can do is support them. Any further comments on this? So we've got those two recommendations, and they're supporting the document. I think that shows how good this piece of work is and how good the work that's been done on it is. So I'm quite happy to not add any recommendations for the sake of adding them. So I'll take that to the vote, if that's all right. Alicia, if you'll want to go into the voting. Does anyone need those recommendations read again? Or they're quite clear, weren't they? Right, thank you.
No worries, thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress, members, on ModGov. Councillor Riley, can I take your vote? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That makes 12 votes for, so those recommendations are unanimous.
Thank you, that's great, unanimous, and thank you very much for your help today and all you've done on that item. The next item is item JOS 24.6, the annual review of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy. And who's introducing this? Or is it being... Yeah, okay, I'll pass it over to you to introduce this report. Thank you. Please feel free to take a moment. If you're not told you're introducing something and then all of a sudden you might need a few moments to just gather your information together.
This is the annual review of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy. We originally launched the strategy in 2019, and the agreement was that on an annual basis, overview and scrutiny would review the strategy and deliverables against that strategy on an annual basis. So this is what we've got on your agenda today. So I just wanted to show a bit of a summary of progress against the delivery plan since October 2022, which was when we last reviewed the strategy. We've done in previous years, the annual review of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy has included a review of the Joint Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy. However, that strategy is a statutory document, and a new version was adopted by the councils in March of this year. So that will now be reviewed separately by overview and scrutiny. So this is only focused on homes and housing strategy. Just to make that point absolutely clear. We have done a lot of work in the past on, since its launch in 2019. Each year we've kind of reviewed it in a different way to make sure that it's kept up to date and is obviously tackling the most important issues that we have. So as I said, this is the progress of what we've made since October 2022. The current strategic aims for the strategy, now I'm not sure about you, but they are very wordy and quite long-winded and very difficult, I think, for people to understand in a lot of respects of what it is that we're actually trying to achieve here. So one of the things that we did as part of this year's review was we actually reviewed all of the priorities. As you can appreciate, we have a number of strategies within housing. We have a number of priorities for each of those strategies, and then we have a number of delivery plans for each of those as well. It does make it quite time-consuming to review each of those and to monitor the progress against all of those strategies. So what we've done this year is we have looked to combine all of the strategy across housing, with exclusion of the homelessness and rough sleeping reduction one, into one delivery plan, so that it's a lot clearer and easier for members to hold everybody to account on. So achieved this year throughout the homes and housing strategy, because obviously we have got to talk about what we've achieved this year. So obviously we adopted a joint local plan part 1 to provide clear policies and direction to all involved with development. As mentioned earlier, in March 24, we produced a new joint homelessness reduction and rough sleeping strategy and delivery plan, which now sits outside of this. We commissioned and produced an updated housing revenue account business plan, again with its own priorities and strategic actions. We've established a landlords forum to build better relationships and increase access to the private rented sector. So this is obviously not just about our role as a landlord, but our role in housing more widely. We completed an update to the accommodation needs assessment for gypsies, travellers, travelling show people and boat dwellers. And we've developed an engagement plan with members to holistically review the homes and housing strategy. So members that were involved in that those workshops earlier on in the year will know that we all sat in a room and we looked at the delivery plan, we looked at the priorities and made sure that they were still relevant for the councils. So as I said, what we've done is we've reconfigured the homes and housing strategy slightly this year. So we've now got 2 themes within the homes and housing strategy. One of it is about the council's role of shaping the housing market within the districts. So that's kind of private sector, if you like. The other theme is around us being an effective social landlord, which is where you can imagine the majority of our work sits as a stockholding authority. Our vision hasn't changed. Our vision is the same. So for residents to live in affordable, high-quality homes that enable them to build settled, safe and healthy lives within a sustainable and thriving communities. I think we can all agree that that kind of encapsulates what we want to achieve for residents as councils. In the first theme, we've got 2 main priorities, which, as I said, focuses on our role within the private sector, so that the housing market functions effectively, provides homes that are affordable as possible, and that we're making best use of private sector land and private accommodation across the districts. So there is a number of actions under each of those priorities, which you will find within your packs, within the Master Housing Action Plan. And then theme 2 being effective social landlord. So what we've done here is we've aligned these priorities with our housing revenue account business plan priorities, because obviously the housing revenue account pays for all of the functionality associated with being an effective social landlord. So you can't really have one without the other. We're not going to be able to deliver anything within the homes and housing strategy for tenants unless we've got sound HRA accounts.
So the priorities, as I said, we've kind of streamlined those priorities from the priorities that we had before, which were quite wordy, and made them a lot more succinct. I hope you agree. So we're going to be investing in our current homes, which I think goes without saying, and is something that everybody will welcome. Tackling and adapting to climate change, which again is something that we must do to make sure that all of our council housing is up to the environmental standards that are required, providing cheaper energy bills for our tenants, and also protecting our environment. Delivering new council housing. So again, this is a lot about working with providers as well, registered providers. It's not all on the council to deliver homes. We need to work with registered providers to deliver more social housing in general. Improving services that we provide to our tenants, as we would have seen from the previous annual report that we have just debated. Performance does need to improve in terms of tenant satisfaction and the services that we're providing. We also need to look at improving the neighbourhoods that we manage, because again, as one of the members mentioned earlier about satisfaction with neighbourhood is on downturn. Involving tenants in the running of our service. So as part of what we've also done, we have a tenant engagement strategy, which I mentioned earlier, that was launched in 2022, and that had its own delivery plan. So what we've now done is we've incorporated that delivery plan into this Master Housing Action Plan, again, to give everybody oversight as to what we're doing to make sure that tenants are effectively and involved with the running of their council housing services and can influence the services they're receiving. Implementing digital transformation, so again making sure that we're as efficient as possible and that we've got a housing service that is fit for the future and is what our tenants expect, and ensuring sustainable financial management of our council housing services, so feeding back to what I said earlier around needing to make sure we can fund all of this stuff that we want to do. So as I said, we've then developed a Master Housing Service Action Plan. So we've got one action plan ultimately to rule them all, as it were. So our Housing Revenue Account Business Plan, our Tenant Engagement Strategy, and our Homes and Housing Strategy, all of the actions associated with that are now going to be held in one delivery plan. They will be monitored quarterly internally, and obviously portfolio holders will receive updates about that on a quarterly basis. We've merged similar actions because when we looked across all of our delivery plans, as you can appreciate, we had very similar actions in each delivery plan, because what we're trying to do is much the same. All actions have been linked to the aims, priorities, and our focus for our plans for both Babergh and the Mid-Suffolk plan. And as I said, the delivery plan will continue to be overseen by Overview and Scrutiny Committee at the annual review, as it is being today. So our in-progress actions transferred. So we had 37 actions that were in progress transferred to the new Master Housing Service Delivery Plan. This includes reviewing our current systems of grants to private landlords to maximise opportunities to improve the health and well-being of residents and the energy efficiency of the homes. Carry out our Greater Places projects, which I think I mentioned earlier, across both districts. So this is led by tenant data and consultation to make improvements across communal HRA land. Carry out 100% stock condition surveys to help us understand our stock and develop more accurate programmes of work, which again I think was picked out earlier, and ensure our housing management systems are fit for purpose to enable us to deliver a modern housing service that our tenants and staff expect. So they're the key actions around what's already in progress. New actions that we've added. So within the first theme to make sure that the private housing market is working effectively. So we're monitoring and reviewing housing markets within the districts to aid understanding of our needs. Developing a new approach to housing management, which again we talked quite a lot about today, so that we can have a proactive, community focus and more responsive to the needs of and vulnerabilities of our tenants, something that we're not able to do with our current structures. We are working with tenants to create a set of service standards across the whole of the housing service so that colleagues and tenants are aware of the level of service that they can expect and the level of service that we should be providing, and can hold us to account across that. So it is hoped that in the future our annual reports will not just focus on tenant satisfaction measures, but also how quickly we've responded to an inquiry, or how quickly we've responded to a repair, for example. And also we need to improve the financial data that we're providing to Cabinet and members, so that they're aware of the status of the HRA account. As we know, we do have challenges within the council's budgets, and as Deborah mentioned earlier around the government's kind of rules around council housing financing, it's important more so now than ever to ensure that there is no shocks or surprises to members about the state of our council finances. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I might have to just go back to that previous, tenant survey update, and say, can I have a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations that we made, that were voted on unanimously? Councillor Scarf proposing and Councillor Rowe seconding. Thank you. And yeah, we'll go into questions. I do have a question to start off with. With priority 3, delivering new council housing, how much say do we have on the type of housing that is getting built? What do we have any tools that we can use to try and get more of a certain type of house that we want, or for the strategy? Thank you.
So if we're developing using our own land, obviously we refer to the housing need, to understand what the housing need is, and build accordingly. If it's a Section 106 site, we can have some influence there as well. Going forward, we'll be looking to do more work with housing associations. I think there's probably less, we'll have less influence there, but as I said, firstly, we'll still have influence in terms of our land-led and our Section 106 sites.
So is there any argument for, when we're building our own houses and we have complete control, to build a lot more of what we're not getting with housing associations and Section 106?
Yeah, so we need to take a holistic view in terms of the whole of the housing register and what the need is, and also we need to also look at the future demographics as well. So, say for example, we know that in the future we'll have a lot more older people. We need to think about what are the needs of those older people, and what kind of accommodation will they be looking for. There is work going on there at the moment, so we're actually doing a review on our older person's housing to understand what that needs to look like in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Priority 5, which is improving the neighbourhoods that we manage, we've spoken about that earlier, but I just wanted to hone in on one of the things that we're going to focus on next, which was developing the service level agreement for the provision of grounds maintenance services to council estates. And just some observations there. When we did the housing tour of the scrutiny committee, it was evident that there were some areas of the communal areas that were actually not looked after well at all. Presuming that all of that is delivered by public realm, which is another arm of the council, but directly recharged to the housing revenue account, it's my recollection that in previous years we've actually recharged more money from public realm to the housing revenue account accordingly, which is obviously bad for the housing revenue account because it means we're paying out more money. So I'm particularly pleased to see that the service level agreement is coming in. Is it a case of you've got your budget, so you're going to work out what areas need what, trees need doing ever so often, bushes need doing ever so often? Is it a case of actually getting the whole lot better managed, and is it going to be deliverable within the amount of money that public realm charged the housing revenue account? Because my concern would be that they would go, well, actually, we need to do a lot better, but actually this is going to cost the housing revenue account a lot more. How are we going to be able to manage that service level agreement to the advantage of the housing revenue account?
So first of all, if I first of all talk about the issue which is related of service charge, as a housing provider, we should be charging a service charge for the maintenance of those communal areas. And we're not doing that at the moment, and we are looking to introduce that. So this will be the areas that sort of sit around sheltered housing and flatted blocks. And you know, that is mentioned in the rent policy, the national rent policy, that we should be doing that. So that will help us in terms of funding. And then it's really just, you know, consulting with residents and understanding what is reasonable in terms of, you know, the amount of grounds maintenance we carry out. So is it 3 cuts a year? Is it 4 cuts a year? And once we've established that, then it's developing that service level agreement and holding the public realm team to account. And that will be done via via officers, but also via Liz and the tenant board, who will be scrutinising and having reports on the performance in terms of grounds maintenance. And that there'll also be a scoring mechanism where we will expect the public realm team to go out and be doing regular inspections of those areas and grading them, say from an A to E, and then putting an improvement plan in if they're not, you know, doing really what it says in the service level agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Riley, please. Do you have a question?
Get this on. Easy ones first. Page 164, where we talk about households in the category of A to C, meaning they are in housing need. Is this better or worse than last year? So page 164, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. 5th paragraph down.
Sorry, could you just talk us through the question, because we've got it electronically, so the pages don't correlate.
Okay, so here we are, 5th paragraph down. 527 households in Babergh were in category A to C, meaning they were in housing need. But are this 527 quantity, is it better or worse than last year?
So I don't have that information here at the moment, but we can let you know and we can put that in the minutes.
Okay, and coming on to the whole, that's a TBA. Okay. Secondly, I think last time we got to discuss this and talk about strategies, it transpired that we were not inspecting repairs. But as at 5th of April, we were going to start inspecting them. Are we? And what's our percentage of repairs that we do inspect?
So we haven't started inspecting repairs yet, because the inspection of repairs is all dependent upon having the building services restructure in place. We are nearly there with that. So we have employed 2 supervisors now. We've got another one which is has been employed but is not in place yet. And we're also employing our surveyors. So the recruitment, it's fair to say, has took longer than we expected, but it's still absolutely on you know, it's one of our priorities that we will inspect properties. And it won't be all of them, it's a percentage.
Well, I appreciate that, but I mean, so are we still using outside contractors? Or is it all in-house?
No, it's not all in-house, and it'll never be all in-house, because what you do as an organisation is you always have your high-risk works carried out by contractors, and then your lower-risk works are carried out by the DLO. So, for example, your plastering, your plumbing, etc. will all be internal, your roofing, anything that needs scaffolding will be external.
Right, so I'm quite horrified. So we have a 0% inspection regime in-house, in place at the moment for works being done, whether it's work being done by ourselves or by outside contractors. I mean, the moral hazard here is quite high, and I mean, in Pat Rockall's time, it was, the ambition was 1 in 3, but they achieved 1 in 6, and we achieve nothing in 1. So okay, so we're moving forward. We did not meet our strategic target as at 5th of April of having the strategy, and the strategy was in place, but the execution was not in place. When, time-wise, do we expect to have an inspection regime?
So this will all go hand in hand with our new job management system, which will go live January/February. And I think it's fair to say that I'm not saying that we don't do any inspections, because our senior repairs managers are out every day, all day, looking at properties, working with our operatives. And I think it's also worth saying that we have gone through a very rigorous restructure where all the trade staff that have been employed have not only had a standard interview, but have also had a values and behaviours interview, and also have had a test where we built a makeshift flat, if you like, in the depot at Wenham, and they were all tested on their skills to make sure that they had the appropriate skills to carry out the role.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, these are all soft results. I mean, there's no hard results here. You know, I was expecting, as of the 5th of April, you know, the strategy would be implemented, because that's what you told me when we brought this up last time. And now I'm told it's actually we're being pushed forward into later on this financial year, beginning of next calendar year. This, you know, I don't know how to say this, you know, but you're telling me that it's not happening and we're not doing it. And I'm horrified. I was horrified before. I could take COVID as a reasonable excuse, but now you're telling me, no, you know, we've got a strategy, we've got plans, and now we're doing training and we're bringing that up to date.
What I can say is that there has been a significant improvement in building services in the DLO. I mean, members who receive the compliance data will now see that we are compliant, which wasn't the case a year ago. In terms of responding to complaints, I sent some details through to our portfolio holders last week. What I can say is last quarter, our response on time to complaints was around 27%. It now sits at about 84%. So that's a massive improvement. And I know from the number of emails I get from members on a daily, weekly basis, and also the emails that Kathy and Arthur get, that there has been a significant improvement in building services. Unfortunately, this has taken longer than we wanted. That in part has been due to the extra time we had to give the unions. We had to you know, delay the implementation of the restructure, and you know, it was only fair that we gave the unions that additional time. We've also had some delays on the introduction of the job management system, but I would invite any member today to go down to Wenham, our depot, and speak to the staff in that depot, and also go out with our operatives and see for yourselves the tremendous improvements that we've made, and this is the start of things to come. Things do take time, unfortunately, and the other thing I can say is that David and I and the heads of the DLO and asset and compliance team really do work at pace to get these things in. And I think if you look at the way building services was, you know, when I first started in December 2021, it's absolutely unrecognisable now in terms of the quality and the changes that are in place. And I mean, just take, for example, the stock condition survey. We are at 93%. That's almost unheard of in the sector, to do a stock condition survey in a year. So although I will put my hands up and say, yes, not everything has been done at the speed I want it, we have made tremendous strides.
Can I just add as well, where we want to get to, and again, I won't give you a firm timeline on how quickly it's going to take us to get there, but we actually want tenants to be the ones out in other tenants' homes doing those quality checks and those inspections. That should help us get to, you know, to add value to what it is that our senior repairs officers will eventually be doing as part of their new roles.
Well, fair. I mean, I accept what you say, and I also accept that you're all working hard. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I did wonder last time we sat down that, you know, there was an awful lot of effort. You know, it's policies, it's protocols, it's everything but performance. But you're telling me you're performing and we're moving forward. What concerns me is that
we are straying into debate now, Councillor Riley. This is the question part of it.
Right,
but I'm quite happy to...
I will ask my question then. I'll ask my question.
Okay.
Right. Concerned that we've been given timelines that proved, whatever, you know, not, you know, ambitious, even aspirational. Right. What are we with our January, February timeline? Is that ambitious, aspirational?
It's realistic.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions, if I can, but they're quite succinct. First of all, thank you for the reports anyway, because I know they do take time to sort of compile, and I know you guys are busy, and they are sort of quite thorough. So thanks for the detail on them. So question one is on sort of EPCs and sort of energy ratings. So we've got this aim to get to sort of everything being at least a C by 2030. So where are we at with that? Are we on target? And is there a big disparity between Babergh and Mid-Suffolk on those? So sort of is one going to achieve it sort of quicker than the others? So that's question one. I guess I'll ask the other question once you've answered that one. Thanks.
So our aspiration on EPCs is to get to level C by 2027, which is ahead of the government target, which is 2030. We are on target for that. And there isn't a disparity between Babergh and Mid-Suffolk. It's pretty equal.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, that's good to know. So sort of 3 years early. Also, so we've now adopted a policy with empty homes, which is, because obviously it's a very quick paragraph in here, which is sort of to turn empty homes into sort of safe, secure places. So could you just please maybe explain to us like the mechanisms of how we do that? So we identify an empty home, it's been empty for say like a year, 2 years. So what happens then? What's the sort of next steps, please?
So we have an empty homes officer, so we try and work with the owner of the property to try and get them to bring it back into use. We've got grants we can give them if there is, you know, work that needs carrying out. And what we predominantly try and do is we try and get them to agree to put it into our Central Suffolk lettings pot so we can rent it out, give them an income and use it for housing need in the district. So that's basically the process we take. You know, if we can't do that, then there are sort of legal remedies that we can take.
Thank you very much. Councillor McLaren, please.
Thank you, Chair. The first question I've got is, how many empty homes do we have that actually are inhabitable and would need sort of rebuilding or some very devastating work to happen? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't have that information to date, but we can get that information and put it in the minutes.
Because it's something that the press use a lot, don't they? And it would be worth knowing. And my second question, I've got to raise this because I've had a problem. Almshouses, are they private landlords or social landlords?
There's no straight answer to this one. So almshouses, so they're usually owned by charities, and by and large, the people who live in almshouses don't pay a rent. They pay a fee to live there, so they're not classed as tenants. It's quite a sort of a complicated arrangement, and not one that I know a lot about, although I did get involved with one of the parishes around some almshouses that needed significant investment.
The reason I ask the question is because there are no grants. I mean, I've got some almshouses. There are no grants that are available to them that are easy, and the property is actually deteriorating. But I would like a conversation. I don't know how many groups of almshouses we've got across both districts, but I would like a conversation, because eventually these people are going to be homeless because there is no money to, I mean, they're just so old buildings. But ultimately, would we have the responsibility to rehouse those people?
So potentially, depending on whether they're in priority need. But what I would suggest, if it's okay, if you contact Robert Feeks. Right, okay, yeah, because he's got a lot of detail. But yes. Yeah, and there is a National Association of Almshouses that you know would be able to support that. But if you leave that bit with me, I'll see where we are with that, because we have done some work with some parishes with almshouses, and there are grants available. We've issued grants to almshouses in the past when they've needed new boilers, etc.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wyman, please.
Thank you, Chair. My question really sits around page 22 on priority 3 in the joint home strategy. Clearly we need to build more homes. We're at a point, and David alluded to it, in relation to the joint local planning strategy which both councils are currently undertaking. Would it be possible to know from the cabinet members what input they're getting into JLP Part 2 and the call for sites and the ultimate housing allocation? My point really relates to exception sites and also CLTs, which there seems to be a real demand for.
So generally, we would like to see a lot more affordable homes in the district, but there's 3 structural problems that are preventing this happening. One is within our council housing financing, which nearly all councils have got, that are preventing that happening. If you look what's happening outside of that with housing associations, there's a very significant drop-off in housing associations acquiring Section 106 houses. So what that means is that the supply of affordable houses going forward is dropping. At the moment, we're trying to get the housing associations together for some kind of summit to go through what can we do jointly to unblock this. And then the third blocker is that whilst there is demand outside of those for CLTs and people doing other ways of building houses, there are a lot of financial and land constraints on allowing people to do that needs to be unblocked. So you've got, above this level of detail, 3 quite significant society problems that we somehow need to unblock. I'm not sure if that's an answer to your question, but that's very high in our minds as to we have to make progress on all 3.
You also asked about how much feed-in you're getting with the special planning documents.
Yeah, so we obviously are in the process. There's a supplementary planning document for affordable housing, so we're in the process for that. What's the way of answering this? I'm not sure. This is desirable that we tweak the planning process. There's a government view at the moment that the problem is the planning process, which I don't think is the main problem. I think the other things I mentioned are bigger problems than planning. But clearly we all need to be flexible in looking at the planning process if that is blocking affordable homes.
Thank you, Councillor Mitch. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is an observation, but followed by a second question, really. But we have an amazing opportunity through JLP2 to create exception sites in areas where we really know we need decent social housing. We know the private sector won't build it because they're not going to build one-bedroom homes and things like that. So, you know, my question really is, and hope, is that both yourself and our cabinet member for Babergh have a really good and strong input in the planning process to make sure that we shape JLP Part 2 around these really demanding areas, and also to give us the opportunity to create those homes for our residents and communities.
Thank you. We'll take that on board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hendry.
Yes, I have got a question, but I'd like to go back to Councillor Riley's comment about the inspections on repairs. I was wondering, has that been actually put to the tenant board? Because as an ex-tenant, I would not be happy to have yet more time off work. To have a repair is bad enough having to organise it around working, but then to have somebody else coming around to look at that repair that should be done right in the first place. Have you actually asked the tenant board how they would feel about having to have follow-ups to all of their repairs?
So we haven't asked the tenant board that question yet. It's not something that... So we've got to be careful with our tenant board that they're not just a consultative body. So we don't want to ask them the ins and outs and everything. They're not representative necessarily of what all tenants think either. What I would say to both of your points as well is something that's just sort of popped into my mind, Councillor Hendry, is around the satisfaction surveys that we do on repairs. So we carry out 50 satisfaction surveys a month for repairs that have been completed. As part of that work, we then follow up any negative commentary that we get. So if anybody's still unhappy with work that's been carried out, we do follow that up. So we will return and visit those homes. And obviously, tenants will want us to come back out in those scenarios because we haven't done something properly. And it kind of helps us to, before we get to a point where they're wanting to make a formal complaint, I suppose, it's giving us an opportunity to resolve that. I think you're absolutely right. We do need to be mindful that, a lot of our tenants are employed. We have this problem when we do involvement as well. It's the exact reason why our tenant board meetings are at 6 o'clock in the evening, because that then doesn't disadvantage anybody who is at work. I think it's something that we could consult more widely with tenants about. But it is good practice to be post-inspecting around 10 to 15% of the repairs that you've done. But as I said, as that kind of gap that we've got at the moment, we have those kind of satisfaction surveys.
Would that be statutory though? Because I personally would not. I wouldn't want to take that extra time off work.
You would always have a choice. We would always, we would, if we picked one of your repairs, for example, and you said no, we'd move on to somebody else's.
Yeah, lovely. Also, and on the report, on page 175, you're discussing educating tenants in how to be energy efficient with their homes to encourage and support with minimising energy bills and reducing the risk of damp and mould. Now, obviously, this is a very difficult one because tenants know, the advice that they're given is to keep their houses ventilated and keep them heated. But we all know that, in the current climate, a lot of them cannot afford to do that, especially around the fact that an awful lot of our tenants still have prepayment meters. And if you haven't got any money, you can't have the heating on. It's not a case of, I'll put it on and worry about how I'm going to pay for it later. You just can't. And I know an awful lot of people that live in very, very cold houses, and they're not going to have the windows open because, you know, it's going to make the house cold. Most of them dry their clothes inside on the radiators. And I'm wondering, what help do you give? Obviously, we can't solve the financial situations, and I think taking the winter fuel allowance away is going to affect an awful lot of people this year. But what can we do around helping people that are saying, I can't deal with my damp and mould because I quite simply cannot afford to heat my house and have the windows open? So I wondered what work's been done there.
So I think we'll do a double act on this question, if that's okay. So I think in terms of the coldest houses that we've got in our housing stock, it's looking at a full retrofit, and you'll be aware that we have secured the funding from Social Housing Decarb Fund, and that work will be, excuse me, that work is starting shortly. No, they won't. No, they won't. But those houses that can't have the full retrofit, we can still do the insulation works, we can still look at the windows, we can still look at solar panels, we can look at doing a sort of a fabric first and sort of wrapping them. So unless it's a sort of a grade 2 listed building in a conservation area, we probably will be able to do something to it. But of course, we haven't got the funds to you know, to do that to all our properties. But what we can be doing is doing the basics, which is the windows, the insulation, which will make a difference. In terms of metering, I was just wondering, David, my colleague here, whether you know, is there something we can do around metering and referring to social tariffs?
Yeah, so we're doing some work at the moment with Anglian Water, and I know that isn't about energy, but it is a utility bill around how we can make sure more people who are eligible are on what they call social tariffs, so that they get a cheaper rate. Obviously, our energy providers do have those similar tariffs as well. Again, it's just about awareness, and when we identify those people, that we make referrals to the right places. Obviously, we have our own, as a local authority, we have our own sort of household support funding and stuff that we can tap into. But there's lots of other stuff out there as well. And I think this will again come with, it will be one of the benefits that come out of our a more modern housing management structure, where we can be proactive, where we will know who our tenants are. So we won't need members necessarily to tell us that we've got people that are struggling. We know that because we'll know everybody who is behind our front doors, and be able to offer that support, guidance and advice. So yeah, I suppose when we talk about educating tenants, it is more around making some more around awareness, because as you say, Councillor Hendry, not everybody has that choice.
Councillor Jameson.
Thanks. In the report, it mentions the Building Safety Act 2022. Now, I know we haven't got any... a couple of questions. The first one. Now, I know we haven't got any high-rise properties, but I do know, because I've been asked by my tenants if their cladding is safe, and I wondered if we've got any issues with cladding on any of our properties across the districts.
As far as I'm aware, we have done tests, and there isn't any cladding issues across either districts. In terms of the Building Safety Act and the Fire Safety Order, which came at a similar time, the responsibility on landlords is, if you've got a building that isn't in scope, and you've mentioned that we haven't got buildings in scope, and that is correct. We have a responsibility to make sure our fire doors are adequate. So if you've got accommodation that goes so you walk out your flat door and it's on a communal area, so we're responsible for the fire doors, and we're compliant with that. We do carry out regular fire risk assessments, and those are in the results of those are in the KPI documents, which are sent to members and leaders of the councils on a weekly basis. So it's sort of health and safety in general, we know we're good in that area.
Okay, so any cladding we have got is
fine. Yeah.
And the other question, I know you've got a lot of people on Gateway to Home Choice waiting to move properties. So people that are on those waiting lists, because you also mentioned Central Suffolk lettings in your report, do we offer them the option of going into, if they're further down the list, they're not coming forward to get a property, are we offering them the option to go into private rented via Central Suffolk lettings?
So Central Suffolk lettings is predominantly for people who are homeless. So people who make a homeless application, we will try and get them a private rented property. In the private sector. So people who are on the housing list predominantly want to go into social housing.
Right,
so no, we don't.
No, okay, so how often are properties coming up on the Gateway to Home Choice list? Because you say you've got 972 households registered on there, so are they coming up?
Oh, they come up weekly, so they're advertised regularly. Right. I don't know if members can go on and have a look. Do you know?
No, you will only be able to see kind of what's available to you. So if you've got a 3-bedroom need, for example. If you've got a 3-bedroom need, for example, then you will only see 3-bedroom properties that are available to you that week. In terms of numbers, we have about 30 empty homes coming into us a month. So obviously, we probably sort of advertise somewhere between 20 and 30 homes on a monthly basis. Yeah, demand always, obviously, as you know, demand will always outweigh supply. So.
Thank you very much. A question on the Gateway to Home Choice. Councillor Riley was talking about the banding and whether it's increased or reduced. Is that A to C? I believe I can't find it in here. They're the anything outside C is the person's considered adequately housed. Is that right? So that would be something that demonstrates our housing need.
Yeah, so within our allocations policy, anyone in band D is what we call a reduced preference. So we use that band for anybody who may be insignificant rent arrears or be a perpetrator of antisocial behaviour. For example, we can just, they might be a band A without that, but we use that banding that is there for landlords to use to encourage, better tenancy management. Band E is basically you don't have a housing need, but you're still able to be on the housing register. Anything above that there is a need. So A, B and C, and it's just you're prioritised, obviously A being the top and C being still in need, but not as much so as somebody who's in A, for example.
So if someone was considered adequately housed, but they wanted to move for whatever reason, because of a dispute or something like that, where would they come on the banding?
So they would be band E, but they could also, depending on so I don't know if, for example, they had a health condition for the reason, they might want to move because where they're currently living is impacting on their health. Providing we can evidence that, we could then look to give them priority, even though they are classed as being adequately housed. Or we would also look to encourage them to look at mutual exchange, because obviously you don't need any need at all, you just need to find somebody who's wants your type of property.
And we have a sort of database of the people that are willing to go into mutual exchange, and that a resident that wanted to move could look through that and decide.
Yeah, so we have two mutual exchange service providers. One is Home Swapper and one is House Exchange. So all of our tenants can register their details on those services. Eventually, again, when we've got a sort of a more proactive housing management approach, it could be that we use those tools to start looking
for matches for people and suggesting matches to people. We don't do that at the moment because of resource implications. But yeah, we have 2 services that tenants can use. I mean, there's nothing, you know, tenants can use any way to find an exchange. They could put something on Facebook, they could put a postcard on the village notice board if they wanted to. They just need to come to us when they found one, and we will facilitate that.
And you talked about resource. It does seem like there's a few tenants that we have that constantly cause antisocial behaviour and move from one house to the next until there's another problem. Have we got any long-term plan to deal with them, or, you know, to get them so that they're not having problems where they're staying? And what resources would we need to achieve that if we're not achieving it already?
So there's a couple of things there. Firstly, there is our review of housing management and getting sort of more feet on the ground and offering more support to our residents out in the communities. And the second thing is something we're introducing called Good to Go. And this is where anyone who is looking to transfer from one property to another will have their house inspected. And if there is any willful damage and neglect in that house, they will be suspended from bidding on the choice-based letting system until that damage and neglect is put right. And that will go live again when the job management system goes live in January, February.
I did see, I thought I saw a hand. Was the one that went up? No? Well, I'm happy to conclude the questions there and go into debate. Would anyone like to start off the debate? We've had lots of questions with the inspections. I think that was quite a topic. The whether or not a tenant has the work that's been done in a house has an inspection. It does seem like it's necessary. Rarely, but it would be a way of keeping an eye on new contractors and people that maybe we didn't have the relationship with before. But we had EPCs on target 2027, which sounds really good. I believe that's before we actually need to do it by. The almshouses we discussed, which I think there is a recommendation there that maybe that we discuss what happens with those. I had to Google almshouses. I don't have any in my ward, but it does make sense, and I think that might be not maybe on other councillors' radars. And thank you, Councillor McLaren, for bringing that up. We've talked about the JLP and the supplementary planning documents, not the special planning documents. We've also discussed like mould and heating, the tenants that might not be using their heating because they can't afford it, and how we know that's happening, because in my experience there's ever such a lot of tenants, especially the older people, will just put up with things, and they just keep putting up with things, and they don't want to cause any trouble. And I think with things that are happening, we do run a bit of a risk, but there's it's always really difficult. I was a first responder for the ambulance service previously, and there was a lot of older people that just didn't believe that there's anything wrong with them. They'd lay on a floor in their living room for 2 days rather than bother someone to call an ambulance. There's other people that are very quick to call an ambulance for whatever reason. But we do have like very resilient, very tough older people, and they just put up with things. So that is a worry for me, that I don't know quite what the solution would be, apart from maybe inspections, which I don't know if that's a route that we want to go down when we're doing, I don't know, monthly inspections on different council houses. It's very high on resource, and also it's quite invasive to the tenants and might not be too popular. But and we talked about cladding amongst other things. I think to say that where we've come a long way with this is an understatement. This does go ever such a long way, and we're moving forward. There is, I'm glad to hear that January, Feb is realistic, and that we're going to hit that, hopefully. And also, in the papers, it says that the stock condition survey is 75% done, but I heard you say it's 93% done since these papers were, and that's moving at an incredible rate. That's moving very quickly. So I'm pleased to hear that. I'll go to the councillors. Would anyone like to comment on this or talk about any recommendations? We did talk about almshouses as a recommendation that should be on the radar. We've talked about it in the meeting, which is sometimes enough, but I think there is a recommendation there. Councillor Scarf.
Well, it's not a recommendation in its own, but it comes from a recommendation that we approved at a previous meeting when we discussed the issue before, which was actually about the stock condition surveys, because the stock condition surveys were planned to be over a longer period of time, and members put pressure on the housing department to actually do them quicker, because until you know what you need to do, you can't plan for anything. So congratulating you on how far you've got, because that proved that it could actually be done, and I think we're in a much better position now. But that was a direct recommendation from this joint scrutiny panel, I think a year ago.
Councillor McLaren.
I've not got to my recommendation yet, but I just want to say to the team that we recognise, or we should recognise, the work that has been done to improve the systems and everything surrounding housing. For some councillors, they won't be aware of all the work that was ahead of the new teams, and they've done really well, and I want to say well done for that, because you've brought it up. And in the light of the regulatory requirements, I mean, that's important. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether I could cheekily put forward a recommendation, but it's almost an addendum to 3.2, but I think we need to have a bit more laser-like focus on what we think the strategic housing position should look like, and my sort of cheeky little recommendation would be ordinance. Oversight and Scrutiny Committee encourage and support Housing Cabinet members to create social housing development opportunities during the formulation of JLP Part 2 and the housing and the housing allocation policies. I only put that forward simply because it's just such a great opportunity for us as joint districts to make a real difference. And we can do this, but we need to have a lot more focus on where we put our homes and how we do it. And at the same time, we try and mitigate the cost of implementation and development.
So I'm quite happy to do a show of hands to add that as a recommendation. Has everyone got that, or would you like to read it?
So I have it written that the committee encourages for cabinet members for housing to create social housing development opportunities during the formulation of a JLP Part 2 and housing association policies.
The housing allocation policies.
Housing allocation policies, that's fine.
Councillor McLaren.
I'd like to go with my recommendation. Really what I'm looking for is a pan district, so that's both districts, as sort of a district-wide conversation on almshouses, because I have no idea how many there are across both districts. But it is a problem that is developing quite seriously, because these old charities, often Victorian charities, have no money, and people that are living in these almshouses are at risk from being very much inadequately housed, and the almshouse charities are struggling, and they've got big decisions to make. So I would like a wider conversation with all members who have almshouses in their wards to get together and meet with the Housing Directorate. Thank you.
As much heating. I think that would be a good case for prioritising the retrofitting.
Just that the committee would encourage housing to prioritise retrofitting properties.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That people want to make, or shall we? We do have an initial recommendation on there that comes with the paper, which I've not got in front of me at the moment. Are there any issues that anyone's got with the additional recommendations that have been put on there? I don't think we need to vote on them. I think you can just say now if you've got an issue with any of them, and I can't see any hands. So could you read out the recommendations, please, and then I'll look for a proposer and a seconder this time.
Good idea. So I have 4 recommendations. Number 1 is that the committee notes the contents of the annual Joint Homes and Housing Strategy and endorses the improvements made to the service. Recommendation 2, that the committee encourages the Cabinet members for housing to create social housing development opportunities during the formulation of the JLP Part 2 and the housing allocation policies. Recommendation 3, that the committee encourages the Director of Housing to start conversations with ward members about almshousing and what we can do to support residents who live in this type of accommodation. A recommendation 4, that the committee asks the Housing Department to prioritise retrofitting properties to assist tenants with the costs of heating their homes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now open in ModGov. Councillor Riley, can I take your vote? Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Members, that is 12 votes for, so that's unanimous.
Thank you. So that's carried. And thank you very much. It's been a long morning. It's now afternoon. But thank you for coming and being so thorough with your answers. And thank you, the Cabinet members, as well, for being in attendance. I'll now go on to item 9. Please feel free to leave if you've got somewhere else you need to be. Item 9 is forthcoming decision list. Do members have any comments on that? No. Okay. So that's for noting. So noted. Item 10, Babergh Overview and Scrutiny Work Plan. Any Babergh members here? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was at the Cabinet meeting last week, and it was announced that there was a decrease of interest income of £723,000, and most of this arises from the unexpected closure of one of the council's board investment funds, which has only recently been announced. You understand that this non-appearance of the money was unexpected. Mr. Chairman, even asteroids bend on our destruction and give notice of their intentions. And so what I would like to go please on this side. By the way, I also understood from the questions and answers that there's an element of capital losses here of £500,000. £500,000 capital loss and 112 in interest. Well, I couldn't get any further on this. So I would like this item to have priority for ONS to look at this and to see who were the counterparties, what was the timeline of the loss of money, and what was the rating history of the investment fund. Someone was asleep at the wheel, and we have a significant car crash happening to us. That's the first item I'd like to see on our agenda for looking at, and I would like this to come up next month because the information is already out there and is highly relevant and current. I'd also like us to look at the soft areas of our expenses, particularly how much we're spending on communications and public relations. And also, the third item I want to look at, please, is what we're spending on climate change responsibilities. Last time I looked, we had at least 2 quite senior people involved in this area, and I wasn't too happy with the outcome of their activities. And finally, the fourth item, again, still very soft, how much are we spending on equality and diversity, and do we see value for money? So they're my 4. One is real money going out, and then 3 items of very soft issues as to where we're spending our money. And this is against the background of a forecast gap this year of over £1 million.
So yeah, we do. One of those subjects we'll be able to discuss in the November meeting, I think. Oh, yeah, please.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I'll talk to you after a meeting about your first proposal so I can get some more information about that so I know what to go away and ask officers to come and present and see if that's something we can do. So I'll talk to you after this. In terms of funds and how much money we're spending, so your point about climate change I'll take first. So next month we are doing a report on our climate change, which includes our greenhouse gas and carbon reduction management plan. I can always ask the head of climate change to bring those numbers for you next month, so we can discuss it next month as part of that item. The other spend, I can always talk to Melissa about that, Director of Finance, to see if she can provide that information in her budget reports, which are coming in December, if you think that's appropriate.
Yeah. I mean, thank you, Mr. Norman. I mean, the information is there, and should not take a lot of effort for our senior officers to pull out the information. But, you know, I mean, the soft issues, I'm quite happy that those three items are covered sometime this year. You know, the 612,000 disappearing from our revenue accounts or our asset accounts, I'm extremely concerned with. Because once we've understood what's gone wrong, we can start focusing on what can go right.
Do you know what the fund was?
Well, so it says there was a net decrease in interest income of 723,000. Most of the amount, 612,000, arises from the unexpected closure in September of one of the council's pooled investment funds, which has only recently been announced. And when I tried to get more information on this, I was told
it could easily be a fund that there was concern about, like the whether it was in sustainable and shares. So I think there has been some talk in audit about changing a fund that doesn't suit the council's direction within fossil fuel investment and things like that. But I don't know that for sure. But Councillor Pearson.
I think that was the case. It was announced by the fund that it would be closing. It wasn't driven by.
Oh, okay. We had to. It was.
I'm trying to find the name of the fund.
Okay, but what we'll do is we'll find out the proper information, work out exactly what's going on, and we'll look at it. And we're also meeting next week, the chairs and vice chairs, and we'll further discuss it at that point in that meeting. Stick it on the agenda. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, I did sort of. I think I sent you an email. Was it last month or maybe a bit longer?
This is for the Mid Suffolk forward plan? Is it? Sorry, committee work plan.
Yeah, the work.
Yeah, we'll swap over to Mid Suffolk. We're done with Babergh. There's nobody needs to say any more about Babergh. Oh, Councillor Wyman. Sorry, Councillor Patchett.
Chair, I share Councillor Riley's concern. I sat through a cabinet meeting where that information was shared, as did the chair of Babergh. And we do need to look a little bit more closely at that to understand exactly how that occurred, because it did seem a strange observation.
Thank you very much. And then we'll move on to Mid Suffolk and Councillor Patchett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just wondering whether we could add scrutinised locality budgets, and then obviously because that's quite a small amount of money. It's a lot of money, but it's in respect to what the council spends. Maybe we could add grants in as well, because I know we have just recently changed the parameters of locality, and it's good that we changed the parameters, because it means we can fund slightly different things and more things, but also it actually exposes us a little bit more to that money perhaps not going exactly maybe where it sort of should be spent. So I think I would like to put locality budgets and grants to be scrutinised. So
we'd be looking at the what they can be spent on plus what they have been spent on in the past, and whether we think that's effective.
Yeah, I would like to delve deeper into where money has been spent in the past, and also, we should be scrutinising this, because sometimes we've got a lot of repeat organisations that we sort of year on year do give money to, and I think we should scrutinise it just to see that there's like no nepotism, cronyism going on, because it's like, oh yeah, we've always given it to this organisation for the last 10 years, and like, is there actually something?
There may be some guidance that we can give councillors to make the most of that money. Yes, and we'll put that on the agenda. Councillor McLaren.
Yeah, can I just doing that for years. Ours has never been higher than that. So it might be, I don't know whether it's a joint, whether you think that's a joint discussion or...
I think it's joint, yeah, because we all have locality, we all have grants.
But Mid-Suffolk have always had a higher locality grant than we have.
We'll discuss it, and we'll come back with something that hopefully suits the committee or is possible. Also, I did wonder personally about parking enforcement. I don't know how long it's been since we subcontracted out our parking enforcement in the council, but I know Mid Suffolk's done by Ipswich Borough Council and also West Suffolk Council, and I do wonder if it's time that we look into it and find out how that's working and you know how they're delivering with that service. But obviously we'll look at the art of the possible. And Councillor Malvesi.
Parking charges, council will want to know how it's progressing or not, or what whatever pitfalls they're encountering. Babergh is served by West Suffolk around Sudbury area, and Hadley is serviced by Ipswich.
So it's a very similar setup in Babergh and Mid Suffolk.
Yeah. So both districts will have similar issues, but it'd be good to see what they are.
Yeah, okay. So all will be discussed in the briefing. And is there any further comments on the... Sorry?
April's like not got an agenda. Is that because of the election period?
No, it's just because there's no upcoming items scheduled that far in advance just yet. So if we wanted to pencil some things in for April,
it doesn't mean there won't be anything. It's just you know, we've got capacity for something to go in there if we can get the information in quick enough, and like the officers can provide us with that. And quite often these spaces do get filled as we go forward, especially a few months in advance. So yeah, that gives us a bit of capacity to get one of these issues in. That's it. That's for noting as well. I've got to read this out. Conclude the business at 12:26. And the next Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be held separately. Babergh Overview and Scrutiny will be held on Monday the 11th at 2 p.m. and the Mid Suffolk Overview and Scrutiny will be held Thursday the 14th of November at 9:30 a.m. So we're having individual, we're not having joint overview and scrutiny, we're just having overview and scrutiny. But they will all go into your calendars automatically, so there's no need to worry. It won't be a surprise, but just so you know that's what we'll be doing next month in November. And thank you all for joining us today.